Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Elias, I appreciated your illustration about the dry skin. It reminded me, coming from the semi-arid climate of North Dakota to Washington, D.C., the one thing my wife often says in the summer is that this climate's good for your skin, but it's bad for your hair. So so we're adjusting. But anyway, with that, there's another saying of mine that comes to mind as I listen to several of my colleagues ask questions, and that is I'm fond of saying, Commissioner Goring, to the federal government, please don't impose your mediocrity on our excellence. We're forever trying to dumb down to be more like the federal government, and I don't know why we would ever want to do that. But I want to ask you, Commissioner Goring, a very simple and direct question regarding the pending litigation. There's this other issue, the environmental discussion, but there is a legal issue here that we sometimes like to forget about, and it's the one that North Dakota is leading in federal court. Do you think it's imperative during this stay and during the rulemaking process that the litigation in North Dakota continues to go forward?
Chairman Cramer, yes, absolutely.
And why?
Because of the patchwork of court decisions that exist for the multiple states out there. I believe there's 26 states that have some sort of stay, but it's all founded on different issues that have been brought forward within the courts. We need a final rule so that we can operate with some certainty.
So whether that rule comes from a final rule that's upheld or litigation, we need to get to some finality. And I would agree with you, and I hope that could continue. With that in mind, in the blocking of the rule in North Dakota District Court nearly 3 years ago, many critics, as we're hearing today, of the new rule have characterized the 2019 rule as a rollback of water regulations. I think it's important to remember there's not a rollback of something that's been deemed illegal. In fact, over the decades, the Supreme Court continually kicks this thing back because it goes too far. So that's why there hasn't been a rule. In your role as commissioner, I know that you sit on lots of other commissions, both in official or voting capacity as well as ad hoc. And one of those commissions, of course, is the North Dakota Water Commission. So given all that we've just been talking about and the fact that there's been a stay for the last 3 years, the ultimate conclusion that we draw from some of our friends on the other side of this debate would be that those other 25, 26 states, that the water quality must just be horrendous, given that the Obama rule hasn't been in place for the last 3 years. Is it your experience as a member of the Water Commission in North Dakota that North Dakota's water is getting worse as a result of the rollback of the Obama rule?
Senator Cramer, actually that's probably what's been confusing for me in all of this discussion is, as I've stated before, the Clean Water Act is in place. States have to adhere to it. Whether you choose to have more stringent laws and regulations in place is up to your state, but you still have to work within the confines of the Clean Water Act. Whether the federal government has it or not isn't going to mean you have any cleaner water. What it does mean is how do you mitigate and manage those resources, and that's really what it's about. And most states, the colleagues I work with, have a very good understanding of what's in their watersheds and how to deal with it. And in fact, you can work with EPA to get extra funds to deal with some unique situations in your state also. Our water quality has continued to improve in parts of our watershed, and there are places where we have, because of topography, because of nature, and because of the geology, some have impacted waters, and we continue to try and deal with nature to address those issues. Those are places where agriculture doesn't even exist, where quite frankly it's more residents and residential properties and lake homes that have provided more problems and impacts for us. So I get a bit frustrated at times when we try to help and bring solutions to the table when sometimes when they're pointing the finger at agriculture, it's not agriculture. In fact, I'm proud of how much farmers and ranchers have contributed to the success of managing the resource in the United States. Since 1996, USDA, I believe, recorded 100 million tons of topsoil every year is saved from wind and water erosion because of conservation practices and systems that have been put in place. And because of new practices and technology and precision agriculture, we're doing a much better job with managing the resource and protecting it.
Thank you. Great
Would my
illustration,
colleague
Dan.
yield to me for just
Yeah,
for
please, sure,
15
certainly,
seconds, if you
certainly.
don't mind? I'm glad to hear what you're saying about conservation and how we can do good and do well at the same time through smart conservation practice. I would just have us keep in mind one of the things that concern folks on our side, maybe some on your side, is that the Clean Water Act will not apply to waters removed under the Trump-WOTUS rule. Will not apply. That's one of the reasons we're concerned.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thanks to all of you for the irrevocable gift of your time, your expertise. I might want to hone in just on something you said, Mr. Elias, in responding to Senator Carper's question about the things we agree on. Because I think you hit the nail on the head when you said, we agree on these things, the question remains, who is it that we look to for protection? You just articulated why you feel people, at least in your area, in your county, are looking to the federal government for help, given evidently, a shortcoming in the state level. And that frightens me because, like I said, when there are very few people in North Dakota that ever look to the federal government for help or expertise on particularly our natural resources. But we're not all the same. It's 50 different experiences, 51 or 52, depending on who all you include. But I want to, Commissioner Goring, you've talked a couple of times and quite articulately about what I think is the real discussion of the day. In fact, I'm intrigued by the letter from the Congress of American Indians, because we have sovereignty is a desire for all of us, as states, as tribes. Sovereignty implying that we govern ourselves and under the larger umbrella. We don't yield that to the federal government, and yet at the same time, when there's a shortcoming, then we look to the federal government. The issue of primacy, and I want to hone in on that because we haven't spent a lot of time talking about. You have tried to, I think, particularly under the Clean Water Act issues, but there's lots of areas. I was a regulator for 10 years in North Dakota, overseeing environmental and particularly environmental regulation in the energy area. And I carried one of the portfolios I carried was the coal portfolio. So SMCRA laws, which are the Surface Mining Control Reclamation Act, which oversees the reclamation of mining, was under my jurisdiction. But it was federal laws that we enforced. And that state primacy, that cooperative federalism model works very well when you have the unique understanding and intelligence of the local area under the umbrella of federal oversight, and a relationship with the federal government that is mutually respectful. And so regular audits, reporting, all. I just think this idea that somehow we're going to trust, gun-toting, federal agents or the Corps of Engineers, a military body basically, or at least underneath the Department of Defense. We've had more problems, whether it's Swamp Buster. Swamp Buster is better because USDA tends to be more farmer-oriented. But whether it's Swamp Buster or WPAs, wildlife protection areas under the Fish and Wildlife Service, which is more concerning to me, gosh, the closer enforcement can be to the people that you're enforcing, I can't think of many examples where it would be worse than turning it all over to the federal government. So I'd like to see us get back to your point. We all agree on these goals. What's the right mix of enforcement so that people can have a sense of confidence, clarity, and frankly, better oversight? And I just think that, and the other thing, and by the way, one of you brought up, I don't remember which one, but there actually, I think it was maybe you, Mr. Fornstrom, that brought up the issue of, I call it perverse incentives, that you can actually have an incentive, a well-intentioned goal that is actually perverted when you're punished for your good deed. That it costs more money not to comply than it does to comply. And so consequently, you give up. And I think we have to be very careful about that, too. I like natural incentives that cause, again, the best enforcement and really the best management at the closest level. So with that, and if anyone wants to comment on that, you're welcome to for the next minute and 39 seconds. But I just want to make that point and just, again, thank all of you for your expertise and your concern for this issue, and all of you for this very good dialogue. And with that, I'd either allow anybody to answer or yield back.
Mr. Forstrom?
I agree, and thank you. One of the biggest things that we want to put forth is the clarity in the rules, and then knowing who is going to enforce those rules. We prefer the local, but we would like to know by looking at it what it is and where it's at, and it's that simple. It's not rolling anything back. It's wanting to know who we're supposed to find.